Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of Allah, the most gracious and the most merciful. Now we're going to do another new component, which is the coordination in humans. Though it has some questions from the old syllabus, but then I've also tried to add new questions from the new component. So I hope that is going to be helpful for you all. Now let's start with question number 1. 4 effects of a specific hormone are listed: increased blood pressure, increased blood glucose concentration, increased rate of respiration, and reduced blood flow to the gut. What is this hormone? Okay, let's look at the hormones. Adrenaline, glucagon, insulin, testosterone. Now if you look at adrenaline, it's a fight and fright hormone. So it increases blood pressure, yes. Blood glucose also increases because it acts on the liver and converts the glycogen to glucose, because when you're fighting you need more glucose in the system so that there's more aerobic respiration and more energy release so that you can fight a good fight. Increased rate of respiration releases more energy, and reduced blood flow to the gut because the blood is diverted to the muscles. We don't want the intestines to be, there's no indigestion or anything taking place. We want more blood reaching the muscles so that more muscular activity can take place and the person can run or fight. So that is why the answer to 1 is A, which is adrenaline, because adrenaline will result in more blood pressure and all that. Question number 2. The diagram shows a person sweating in hot weather. What part is played by the sweat glands during the process of sweating? Effector, receptor, sense organ, stimulus. Okay, so let's talk about a person enters a room, is very hot. Now your skin has receptors, temperature receptors. They detect this room is very hot. So all this information taken by the sensory neuron reaches the brain through the spinal cord. And all that information is processed by the brain, and brain sends impulses to the effector, the sweat gland. They produce sweat. The sweat evaporates and cools the body down. So what part is played by the sweat gland during the process of sweating? It is an effector. The effector causes the sweat to be produced, and then the sweat evaporates and cools the body down. Receptor would be the temperature receptors in the skin. And the stimulus is, this room is a hot environment, so the environment is the stimulus. Question number 3. Now this is a very tricky question because this is new to the syllabus. We haven't done synapses in the previous syllabuses. The diagram shows a synapse in a reflex arc. What are the identities of the two neurons, and in which direction does the neurotransmitter pass? Okay, let's revise this first. Now just a quick recap. First of all, this gap. This is called the synaptic gap, which is space between the two neurons. There is a presynaptic neuron and there is a postsynaptic neuron. And the impulse is coming this way. And the presynaptic neuron always has the neurotransmitter molecule, which is in the form of vesicles, and these are called synaptic vesicles. Then there are lots of mitochondria because a lot of ATP is generated and a lot of energy is needed. And this structure here is called the synaptic knob, just like a doorknob. And the nerve impulse is coming here. They've shown you this as a nerve impulse. And when the nerve impulse comes, this is going to generate an action potential. So what is going to happen is that calcium ions are going to diffuse in, and that is going to cause the vesicles to move and fuse with the presynaptic membrane. And then there is exocytosis. Exocytosis means they burst. And the chemical is released. You can see the chemical is in this brown dots here. These are the chemicals. And the chemicals are released. And the chemical will go and bind on the receptor, which is the receptor on the postsynaptic neuron. And then it will cause the opening of the sodium channels, and sodium ions will enter, and then an action potential will be generated in the postsynaptic neuron. Or we can say the nerve impulse will travel in the postsynaptic neuron. Another very good diagram here. Number 1, nerve impulse arrives. Number 2, calcium channels open, calcium ions diffuse in. Right? Number 3, causes the vesicles to move and fuse with the presynaptic membrane, and then the vesicles burst and the neurotransmitter chemical is released. It goes and attaches to the ligand gated channel open, and of course this causes an action potential or a nerve impulse in the postsynaptic neuron. Now I'm going to review a reflex arc. Number one, arrival of a stimulus and activation of receptor, activation of a sensory neuron. So this, right, starting from here to here is the sensory neuron. And then we have a relay neuron. This is the one which is the relay neuron. And then we have a motor neuron, which is M motor, M muscle. So the synapse is between the sensory neuron and the relay neuron, and the relay neuron and the motor neuron. So the sensory neuron is the presynaptic here, and then the relay neuron is the postsynaptic. But then when you come to this synapse, the relay neuron here is the presynaptic and the motor neuron is the postsynaptic. So you've got to understand is that there is this one neuron coming here and then there is another neuron here. So if the impulse is traveling here, this will be the pre and then this will be the post. So pre can be either sensory or relay, or either they can be sensory or relay and then there is motor. So the synapse is between either the sensory or the relay or between the relay and the motor. It can't be any way around. So the direction is either from the sensory to the relay neuron or from the relay neuron to the motor neuron. This is what you have to understand. If you can understand this, you can do the next MCQ. This is what are the identities of the two neurons in which direction to the neurotransmitter. Okay, so if it's P to Q, that is what is in these two possible answers. Motor and relay. No, what did I tell you? It has to be sensory, relay, and then motor. So it either has to be sensory or relay or between relay and motor. So if it is saying between motor and relay, well, this is wrong. Then P and Q between motor and sensory, this is wrong. Okay, so now what do we have? Let's look at the other one. Now let's draw it, do this rough work on the paper. So it's between Q and P. Direction is like this. So can this be relay and this be motor? Yes, it can be relay and motor. But it cannot be relay and sensory. So that is why the answer is C. You see, I just revised it with you and I hope this is clear to you that the synapse can only be between sensory and relay and motor. And the direction has to be sensory to relay and relay to motor. So then you have to see these directions, that if the direction is Q to P means in this direction. So this either had to be relay or motor, or this had to be sensory and relay or relay and motor. Okay, now question number 4. What is the most important function of sweating? What is the most important? Why do you sweat? You enter this room is very hot. When you start sweating, it's going to carry this heat away because as the environment is hot, so your body is going to get heated up as well. So the answer is to remove excess heat from the body. To remove excess salts, no. To remove excess urea, no. That's function of the kidney. Excess salts is also function of the kidney, and excess water is also function of the kidney. Then coming to question number 5, a student begin to lose control of a bicycle while traveling down a hill at speed. The concentration of which substance will begin to increase rapidly in her blood? Well, it has to be adrenaline. Why? Because I mean, she's losing control of the bike. She's going to be very anxious. She's going to be very scared. Flight hormone. Fright, fight, flight hormone. Anxiety situations. You're bunking the class and you're bunking the bio class, and there you see Dr. Saira. Well, of course, she's going to give you hell. So it's going to be a lot of adrenaline being produced. Question number 6. 4 processes occur when impulse cross a synapse. Neurotransmitter diffuses across the gap. Remember we said There's a presynaptic neuron and there's a postsynaptic neuron. This is the synaptic gap. So let's read all of them. Neurotransmitter diffuses across the gap. Neurotransmitter binds with receptor. Impulse stimulates vesicles. Release of neurotransmitter. So what are you going to see? What is going to happen first and what is going to happen second, third? You've got to put them in the right order. So it's going to be impulse stimulates vesicle. So an impulse arrives, is going to stimulate vesicles. So R, and then it's going to cause the release of the transmitter. Why? Because it goes to attaches here, and then there is exocytosis, and the chemical is passed out. So neurotransmitter, release of neurotransmitter, and then neurotransmitter diffuses across the gap. So this neurotransmitter diffuses across the gap, and then neurotransmitter binds to receptors. There are these receptors here, and the neurotransmitter binds to it. So that is why the answer was C. Which hormone is involved in the conversion of glucose to glycogen? Glucose to glycogen. So too much glucose in your system, what happens? The hormone insulin is released from the pancreas, and this extra glucose in the blood enters the liver cells, and there is an enzyme present which is to convert the glucose into glycogen. The glucose in the blood will return to normal. It's negative feedback. Question number 8. The diagram shows the structure of a human skin. X, Y, Z. Y is the hair erector muscle. What is Z? Z is the sensory neurons because these are the receptors here. And the receptors will be sensory neuron will be going and informing, going to the spinal cord and then going to the brain, informing the brain. And X is the sweat gland. Y is the hair erector muscle. S is the sensory. Z is the sensory neuron. Sorry. What are X, Y, and Z? X is the sweat gland, so it could be either of these, C or D. Y is the hair erector muscle and Z is the sense, so the answer is C. Question number 9. The diagram shows the structures in a reflex arc. So if this is the receptor, then this is the sensory neuron. And the cell body is in the dorsal root of the ganglion. And then this is the relay neuron. And then this is the motor neuron. M motor, M muscle goes to a muscle. So motor neuron, I'm just revising it with you all. Sensory neuron, and the green is the relay neuron. Now it says, what is X? X was that gap between the sensory and the relay neuron, and that is the synapse. It was the gap. I'm just going to rub it off so that you can see it. It was the gap between the sensory and the relay neuron. There will be another synapse here as well. So this is a synapse and this is also a synapse here as well. Question number 10. Which row describes accommodation when you are viewing a near object? I've told you in my videos also NMC. Near, more, convex. Nadia, more crazy. So near, more convex. So when you're looking at a near object, the lens is more spherical. Now what happens to the ciliary muscles? The ciliary muscles will, because they're holding the lens, so they have to contract. And the suspensory ligaments become loosened, so they become slackened. That is why the answer is A. But you need to revise this, look at my video and have a look at it again. And I explained that in my previous videos on this chapter, which is the new syllabus. Then question number 11, hormones and nervous system both control our bodies. Which statement about the control provided by hormones is correct? Now, it's not a fast response because nerves are very fast, but hormones are slow. So these two are wrong. Slow response and long lasting, slow response and short lived. Then you think of growth hormone. Growth hormone makes you tall, but then you remain tall, you don't shrink back. So that is why the answer to this would be C, slow response and long lasting. So it affects your growth hormones produced by the pituitary gland, make you tall, and then you remain tall all your life. Then coming to question number 12, the diagram shows the structure of the eye. Which structure refracts light? Which structure refracts light? Cornea. Because here there is air and here there is fluid, aqueous humor, and here there is vitreous humor. B is the iris, the muscles of the iris. C is the fovea, and D is the retina. So which structure refracts light? The first thing which refracts light is the cornea, because as soon as the light strikes the cornea, the light rays are traveling in the air, and then there is another liquid just behind and the cornea is a convex shape, so it is going to refract the light. So that is why the answer to 12 is A, the cornea. Now, question number 13, this was a catch-22 question. I don't like such questions usually because it doesn't check anything. It doesn't check any biology, it checks your English skills. The diagram shows part of the mechanism that controls blood sugar concentration. So they've shown you the liver and they've shown you the pancreas. And then a person does 1 hour of exercise. Wow, that's great. Starting with the pancreas, what is the sequence of events? So pancreas, the arrow is going out here. So you have to choose between 5 and 6. You see, all of them start with either 5, 5, 6, 6. So, starting with the pancreas, what is the sequence of events in which the hormone glucagon is involved? So, if you've been exercising for 1 hour, that means your blood glucose levels are falling. Now, there'll be more glucagon. So, it's going to be 5. And the blood vessel goes to the liver. In the liver, what is going to happen is that the glycogen is going to be converted to glucose. Why? Because the glucose is used by your respiring muscles. When you are exercising, your leg muscles are using up the glucose. So the glucose levels are going to be falling. So the glycogen is going to be converted to glucose. So then it's going to be less glycogen in the liver. And that is going to cause more glucose. So more glucose. So that is why the answer was 541. Got it? Pancreas, exercising, less glucose in the blood, more glucagon released. That results in converting the glycogen to glucose, so less glycogen in the liver, and then more glucose in the blood. Question number 14. What does the central nervous system consist of? As you can see here, the central nervous consists of the brain and the spinal cord. And the peripheral nervous system consists of all the peripheral nerves. So that is why the answer to 14 is B. It is made up of the brain and the spinal cord only. Central nervous system. A very direct question. Either you knew it or you didn't know it. There's no, you couldn't have been doing any guessing games. You have to know it. Central nervous system is the brain and the spinal cord. This is a syllabus point. What is a response to a low concentration of glucose in the blood? You see, when does insulin and glucagon work? Insulin works when your blood glucose levels are high. It converts the glucose to glycogen. But when you have a low concentration of glucose, like these days, just before iftari, your glucose levels are going to fall. So when your glucose levels are going to fall, what is going to happen? We're going to have glucagon. So what will the glucagon do? Will it convert the glucose into glycogen or glycogen into glucose? Either you knew this because glycogen is the complex molecule which stores thousands of glucose units together. So that is why the answer to 15 would be B, because it will convert the glycogen. Glycogen is the complex molecule which has lots of glucose in it. And that is the 5,000 rupee wala note. That is the 5,000 rupee note which you're going to cash. And 5,000 glucose molecules are going to be flooding the blood. So the concentration of glucose increases. So it was very simple. Glucose levels had to increase, not glycogen levels had to increase. The components of a reflex arc are shown in the flow diagram: receptor, sensory neuron, synapse, relay, synapse, motor. Which component is responsible for ensuring that the nerve impulse travels in one direction only? Synapse. You see, the synapse ensures that it all moves in one direction. So this is how, that's why I just told you, synapse to relay. Sorry, sensory to relay, then relay to motor. So there's a synapse in between here and the synapse in between here. So it's SRN. Sensory neuron to relay neuron to motor neuron, SRM. Sensory neuron, relay neuron, and motor neuron. And the synapses are in between this here and here. 17th question. A patient is injected with adrenaline. Which graph shows the expected changes to pulse rate and blood glucose concentration? Pulse rate increases, blood glucose concentration also increases. We did this in the first question. So that is why the answer is going to be C. Both are going to rise. Pulse rate increases and blood glucose also increases because the adrenaline works on the liver and converts the glycogen to glucose, just like glucagon. So more adrenaline, more glucose in the system, because when you're going to fight, then you need more glucose in your blood so that it's reaching the muscles and you can do more muscular activity. It's a fight, fright, and flight hormone. Question number 18. The diagram represents a synapse in the brain involved in the perception of pain. Which label molecule represents heroin? Why? Because you have to see that something which fits here. So that is why the answer would be A. The diagram shows a synapse. Heroin affects the neuron. Which label part does the heroin directly affect? Direction of movement of impulse. It is going to affect this area, the C part, because the heroin blocks these and attaches to receptors on the postsynaptic neuron. The diagram shows the structures on each side of a synaptic cleft. Which diagram is correctly labeled? Very possible question in the exam this year. Now I'll tell you why. The answer is of course A. But why is B wrong? Now B, you can see why is it wrong is the direction of the impulse is wrong. Because you see the vesicles are here, so direction of the impulse should have been like this. But the direction of the impulse is here, so this is wrong because of that. Then this is wrong because it says release neurotransmitter. No, that's the mitochondria. This is the mitochondria. This is not the release neurotransmitter. So that is why this is wrong. And why is this wrong? Because here it says neurotransmitter receptor molecules. The receptor molecules are here on the postsynaptic membrane. So that is why this is wrong. So I've given you the reasons why B, C, and D are wrong. Now this one was correct, so A is correct. I'll just bring it down here so that you can see it again for a little while. You can pause the video here and have a look at it. I'll clear all the ink so that you can all have a look at it. The answer, of course, A was correct, but B and C and D were wrong, and you must know the reasons why they were wrong. 21. The diagram shows a vertical section through part of a human eye. A fly is coming nearer to the eye. The eye begins to focus the image of the fly on its retina. What did I say? Near, more convex. So R is the lens. It has to become fatter. So it has to be either B or C. I said near. When it's coming near, it's going to be more convex. Just remember this. Just memorize this. Nadia more crazy or Numan more crazy. Anybody's name with N. How do the labeled parts of the diagram change? So if you remember this is very easy, you can see it is C. Because what will happen is that Q is the ciliary muscle that will contract and the suspensory ligaments will slacken, so the lens will become thicker. But if it is pulled, then it becomes thin. So that is when the ciliary muscle relaxes and the suspensory ligaments are taut, T-A-U-T, taut. Slack and taut, these are the two words that we use for Suspensory ligaments. It's a very typical English. 2. Where is glucagon secreted? We know it's the pancreas. What is its effect on the blood glucose concentration? Effect on the blood glucose concentration. Glucagon does what? Increases the blood glucose. It's produced just before iftari when you're fasting, and just before the Maghrib time when we are going to open the fast. And that's when glucagon is produced in abundance. So that is why 22, the answer is C. Glucagon is produced by the pancreas. It increases the blood glucose concentration. Number 23, the neurons at synapses contain vesicles. Which type of substance is found inside the vesicles? Neurotransmitter. Everybody knows that. It's a direct question. If you don't know that, absolute changad you are. 24, the diagram shows the muscles that control the size of the pupil in an eye. We have the circular muscles, we have the pupil, we have the iris, and we have the radial muscles. How do the muscles make the pupil smaller? Now you know radial muscles will contract. So radial muscles will contract while the circular muscles will contract because the pupil is becoming. How do they control? So how do the muscles make the pupil smaller? If it's going to be smaller, then the circular muscles are going to contract. Circular muscles are going to contract. I misread the question. So circular muscles will contract, but then the radial muscles, what do they can't contract at the same time? So they will relax. So that is why the answer would be B. Circular muscles contract and the radial muscles relax. Now it's going to be the other way around. If you say pupil becomes larger, then radial muscles will contract and the circular will relax. Muscles can only contract and relax. Please do not use any other word for it. Elastic tissue can stretch and recoil. Now coming to the last question, more adrenaline is produced by the adrenal glands when a person is frightened. The increase affects several parts of the body. Blood glucose concentration doesn't decrease, so this one is wrong. Heart rate increases, so this is correct. Breathing rate and depth, that's also increases. Dilation of the pupil, yes, it doesn't decrease, so this is wrong. So that means this is wrong. So the answer is C, 2 and 3. So you see dilation of the pupil, why? Because more light can enter and you can see more clearly. Breathing rate and depth increases because more oxygen taken up per unit time. Heart rate increases so the circulation is faster and oxygen reaches your body cells faster and carbon dioxide is removed more quickly. Blood glucose concentration will increase because we need more glucose. More glucose means more respiration, means more energy released, and the person can fight, flight, fright, or fright hormone. So it's flight, fright, and fight, the three F's. So that ends this video on the new and the old component of coordination in humans. Thank you very much, and please do subscribe and please do leave your comments. I'll try to do as many videos I can before the final exams. Thank you once again.